Kia ora koutou. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Lex, an advisor here at Charity Services, and I'm joined by Dawn, the Senior Capability Accountant. Today, we're going to complete an online annual return with you using the example performance report we created for our previous webinar, Introduction to Using the Tier 3 Not-for-Profit Standard. The webinar is for charities that complete their annual return online, who are reporting at Tier 3, and who have already completed their performance report. If you've not completed your performance report yet, we recommend watching our webinar, Introduction to Using the Tier 3 Not-for-Profit Standard first. A link to that webinar has been included in the resources and invitation email for this session. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. Can you hear us? Make sure your speakers are unmuted and check your internet if you're having trouble hearing us. In the unlikely event that our sound cuts out, we'll work through any technical difficulties and aim to be back in touch with you as soon as possible. The webinar is being recorded, and we will send you an email with the recording link and any resources we discuss. We have time at the end for answering questions, so please type your questions into the Q&A box as you think of them. Please note, we won't be able to answer questions specific to your charity. For questions specific to your own charity, please email us at info@charities.govt.nz. The first step to filing online is logging into your dashboard. Go to charities.govt.nz and click on Log In, either at the top of the page or the right-hand side. Log in by entering your registration number, for example, CC12345, and your charity's password that your charity has set. You'll also need to indicate that you're not a robot. This will take you to your dashboard, where you can view all of your existing information, update your charity's information, and create and submit your annual returns. If Create Annual Return is grayed out, you probably have previous tasks in progress that need to be completed or deleted first. Have a look around your dashboard for anything marked as In Progress. It should have a green Continue button and a red Delete button next to it. Once you delete or complete the previous task, then you can create your annual return. Please note, you can only create an annual return if your dashboard shows that an annual return is required, as seen on the previous screen. Next, you need to confirm the reporting period the annual return is for. If you only have one annual return to file, this is automatically showing the correct year. However, if you have multiple annual returns outstanding, you must make sure you select the correct year for what you're filing today. Then select the type of annual return form to complete. If you're reporting on the new Tier 3 not-for-profit standard, select the new annual return form as the fields match the performance report. Before you start the annual return, we recommend going through the checklist on this page and reviewing your prepared performance report. This will make sure you have all of the information you need to complete and submit the form. The first few pages of the annual return form show your charity's currently registered information. Make sure you review that the information is correct and up to date. The legal name of your charity is the full legal name of the charity. It must be the same everywhere you're registered. For example, if you're incorporated at the New Zealand Companies Office, it must be the same there. Other name is if your charity uses any other name to operate, list that here. Date of registration and registration number. These cannot be changed, as these are set when the charity becomes registered. The balance date is the date your financial year ends, and it cannot be changed while completing an annual return. If you need to change your balance date, delete this annual return and complete an update details form instead. Inland Revenue Number and NZBN. If these numbers are something you have and are not in the form at the moment, fill them in now. If your postal address has changed, click on the Change My Postal Address button and enter in your new address. If your physical location or street address is different to your postal address, select that option and enter your street address. For areas of operation, if the areas where your charity operates have changed since you registered, select the new areas here. Under the Charity Identity section, the first question asks about kaupapa Māori charities. Your charity may consider itself kaupapa Māori if its primary purposes are to support Māori communities. A charity would be unlikely to consider itself kaupapa Māori if its focus was mainly on outcomes for the wider population. The second question is about Pacifica charities. Your charity may consider itself Pacifica if its activities serve Pacifica people. Alternately, it could be made up of people who identify as Pacifica. The last question is about being established to support ethnic communities in New Zealand or overseas. Tick this box if your charity was set up with a primary purpose of supporting ethnic communities. The New Zealand government defines ethnic communities as communities composed of Asian, African, continental European, Latin American, and Middle Eastern cultures. The charity details section is information that's published on the public register. So if you have a public email address, phone number, or social media, you can list them here. Don't include any private information in those fields. Primary contact information is not publicly available and is used by charity services when we need to contact you. Primary contact is also the person who can reset the login password. Please make sure this is always kept up to date and that the email address you provide is accessible and regularly monitored. You also have the option to provide an alternative contact if you want. This isn't required, but we recommend it in cases of emergencies and changes to staff. Once this information on the page is correct, you can continue to the next page, Officer Details. This page shows your currently registered officers. If any of your officers have changed, you can update this here. To remove an officer, click Remove, confirm the reason they're no longer an officer, and provide the date they stopped being an officer. To change the position an officer holds, click on the current position and type in the new one. To add an officer, click on the blue Add a New Officer button and fill in their details. Make sure that you know the new officer's date of birth and address, as you need those to finish the process, even though they're not shown on the public register. Once the officers are up to date, you can continue to the next page, Purpose and Structure. Purpose and structure page shows your currently registered charitable purpose, legal structure, and activities. These can be edited on this page if they've changed. Your charitable purpose describes your charity's mission or purpose that you entered in your registration. It's also published on the public register. For most charities, this information can be found on your financial statements or performance report or your rules document. Under legal structure, some common structures you might have are trust, society, or company, and you can state whether or not they're incorporated or unincorporated. If you're not sure if your charity is incorporated or not, check the New Zealand Companies Office. Next is main activity, main sector, and main beneficiary. These are all selected from drop-down menus. Please make sure this information is still correct. If it's wrong or if it's changed, you can select a new option by clicking the arrow on the right side of the box. Now we have a question about generating funds or making grants or donations to other charities or organizations, and whether or not that's the main charitable purpose that you serve. Consider the main activities your charity undertakes. Do you raise funds for other organizations or provide funding to them? For example, a charity that raises funds nationally and passes this on to local charities who are providing services in their communities. This is different from charities whose main purpose is to provide the goods or services. An example would be a charity that provides counseling services directly to people. This section is about your organization's rules and governance procedures. If your organization has reviewed its governance procedures in the last 3 years, answer yes to this question and type the date the review was completed. If your existing rules have changed, click yes, state the date that the effective change happened, what kind of change it is, and provide the new document. You'll also need to briefly describe what changed and why. When you've answered each question on this page, you can continue to the next page, Your People. This page is where you tell us how many people your charity paid to do work and how many volunteers and volunteer hours were worked for your charity this year. For paid full-time and part-time employees, include anyone who's paid to work for your charity in an average week, including yourself. Awhina has 2 full-time and 3 part-time employees. Total employee hours. Add up the total hours that all employees work, including yourself, in an average week. Awhina's employees work an average of 140 hours a week combined. For total volunteers, volunteers are people who work for your charity without pay. Tell us how many people in total volunteered for your charity in this reporting period. Include yourself if you're not paid for your work. Awhina's board members are volunteers, and there are 3 of them. Under total volunteer hours, for the volunteers, including yourself, that you recorded in this section, enter the total number of hours they would have worked across the entire reporting period. We count volunteer numbers over the entire financial year. Do not provide a weekly or monthly average. Awhina's board members are volunteers and work an average of 2 hours each per month. This equals 72 hours for the year. When completing this page, make sure you consider your officers and board members. If they're fulfilling their duties without being paid, then they are volunteers. In the same way, if they're being paid to complete their duties, then they need to be included in the paid employees section. It is very unlikely that any organization will have 0 volunteers and 0 employees. If your charity does anything financial or non-financial, then the people or person involved should be recorded here. Once this page is complete and you've entered all your employee and volunteer information for the whole year, you can move on to the next page where you'll select the tier you use to prepare your performance report. You would have already determined what tier you're reporting at when you prepared your performance report, so you'll already know this when you get to this page. Alpine After School Care Trust prepared a performance report using the Tier 3 not-for-profit standard, so we are selecting Tier 3 here as well. After selecting Tier 3, you'll see that more questions appear that need to be answered on this page. For overseas operations, our example charity only operates locally in one location, so selecting No for this question. For donee status, if your charity has received any donations of money or koha this financial year, select Yes. This does not include grants received for specific purposes. Our example charity has, so we're selecting Yes to this question. If you answer yes to this question, a second question will appear asking if your charity spent at least 75% of its funds towards charitable purposes within New Zealand. To answer this, you need to compare the proportion your charity spent on charitable purposes overseas with the total amount your charity spent. If you answer no to the second question, you'll then need to consider the total amount spent overseas over the past 3 years, and if at least 50% of your funds have been spent on charitable purposes within New Zealand during that time. Click on the question mark for more assistance. Control relationships. Your charity is considered controlled by another if all 3 of these are true. Power over your organization. The other charity has existing rights that give them the ability to direct your charity's activities. Access to benefits. The other charity has access to benefits such as profits or services from being involved with your charity. And a link between power and benefits. The other charity can use its power to influence the nature or amount of benefits they receive from your charity. An example of a controlled relationship is where a charity establishes an incorporated society to run a second-hand shop on their behalf, with profits returning to the charity. Alpine Trust is not controlled by another registered entity, so is selected no for this question. Using the same 3 principles, power over the other organization, access to benefits, and links between power and benefits, determine if your organization is being controlled by another entity or controls another entity. Auditing and review. Registered charities with total operating expenditure of $550,000 or more in each of the last 2 financial years are required by law to have an audit or review completed by a qualified auditor. If your charity had expenditure of over $550,000 in only one of the last 2 financial years, before the financial year you're reporting on, but under $550,000 in the other, select option A. If you select option B or C, then an audit or review is required, and you must provide details of who conducted the audit or review, whether they raised any issues or concerns in their report, and why. Remember to include your audit or review report when you upload your performance report. Related party transactions. Look at note 10 of your completed performance report to see if you have listed any related party transactions. Alpine After School Care Trust has listed one, so we're answering yes to this question. Once you've answered all the questions on this page, you can continue on to the next page, financial performance.
The information needed to fill in this page and the rest of the form can be found in your Tier 3 performance report that you have already completed. The fields in the annual return and the figures you enter for each one must match the performance report. If you don't see the same fields as your performance report, you may have selected the wrong tier. When filling in the annual return form, please use whole figures rounded to the nearest dollar. As you can see, cents are already included on the page. To complete the statement of financial performance in the annual return, find the statement of financial performance in the performance report you have already completed. In the revenue section, Athena After School Care Trust received $27,600 in donations. So they have included this amount on the first line. They received $400,000 in general grants. They received $100,000 in government service delivery grants. They received $1,000 in membership fees, $200,000 in revenue from commercial activities, and $250 of interest. $2,000 in revenue. Be sure you check your numbers. They did not receive any capital grants and donations, non-government service delivery grants or contracts, and had no other revenue. So we have entered 0 into each of those fields. In the expenses section, Athena After School Trust had $1,200 in expenses related to fundraising. They had $324,000 in employee remuneration and other related expenses. They had $5,600 in volunteer-related expenses and $1,000 in expenses related to commercial activities. The trust also had $41,200 in other expenses related to service delivery. Other expenses related to service delivery.
Thank you.
They gave $2,000 in grants and had $2,500 in other expenses. You can see that the total revenue, total expenses, and surplus deficit fields have all automatically calculated. These totals must match your existing performance report exactly. If they don't match, check that you have entered all of the figures and that they are all correct. Once the fields have been completed and these figures are correct, click the next button. I just want to check our numbers. Can you scroll up a little bit? Oh, I'm at the wrong page. 505?
Mm-hmm.
These aren't different numbers. That's okay.
Yeah, that's the same.
All right, I'm on the wrong page. Okay, it's fine. Once all these fields have been completed and these figures are correct, click the next button to continue to the next page, financial position.
It is always worth checking, though.
Always worth checking. And you can always come back to this page if you find you've missed something or numbers have changed. You can move back to this page before you submit this return.
That's right.
To complete the statement of financial performance in the annual return, find the statement of financial performance in the performance report you have already completed.
Financial position.
Oh, sorry, I've skipped a page. To complete the statement of financial position, find the same section in your completed performance report. For current assets, Athena After School Care Trust has $150,250 in cash. They also have $500 worth of prepayments. Do not have any inventory or other current assets, so we have entered 0 into those fields. For non-current assets, they own $22,500 in property, plant, and equipment. They don't have any investments or other non-current assets, So those are 0. For liabilities, Avena After School Care Trust has $14,900 in current liabilities. They do not have any non-current liabilities, so we have entered 0 there. For accumulated funds, they have $5,000 in capital contributed by owners or members. They have $77,350 in accumulated surplus and $76,000 in reserves. You can see that all of the totals have now been calculated. These totals need to match your performance report exactly. If they don't match, check that you haven't left any fields blank and that everything has been entered correctly. There is a new question in this version of the annual return about your charity's accumulated funds. Here you can briefly explain, or you are required to briefly explain, what your charity plans to do with the money it has saved. Think about how this money will be used to help advance your charitable purpose and your specific reasons for accumulating funds. For example, you might be saving to make sure your charity can keep running in the future, or you might be saving for a significant project or planned capital purchase. There's quite a lot of space here, so you can be as specific as you'd like. If there's more than one purpose you have, or more than one plan you have for your accumulated funds, you can tell people, hey, look, we think that this amount will cover 2 to 3 years of operating expenditure in case we lose any funding, or we have a specific project and we're very close to meeting it and we think we'll meet it in 2 years. Entirely up to you how you want to use this space. But make sure that it is transparent for the readers of the annual return. Right. Financial information. The next section is where you upload your completed performance report or state that it will be sent in separately. Uploading the performance report directly is the easiest and quickest way to submit it. So we are going to select the first option. I would like to upload my performance report now. Then we click Browse to find the document on our computer and select it. Once we see the file name in the empty box, click Upload to upload it. You can see now that the performance report has been successfully uploaded onto the annual return. If your charity has a requirement to undergo a review or audit, you can upload the report from the auditor here if it isn't already included in your financial statements or performance report file. If you choose the second option, that is emailing, or posting your performance report, you will not be able to upload the performance report at all and will need to send it in separately by email or post. Please note, choosing this option will lead to a higher filing fee. Below your uploaded performance report is a checklist where you will confirm that the performance report you are providing has all of the required information. Please make sure the performance report you upload or send in has each required section and that each section is fully completed. Once the checklist is ticked, you can click the Next button to continue to the next page, certification.
This page is where you confirm that all the information in this annual return, including the attached performance report, is correct and that you're authorized by the charity to complete the annual return. Do this by ticking the box and typing in your first and last name into the first and last name fields. When you do this, you're digitally signing the annual return form. You must also state if you want to restrict information from the public register. If you choose this, you must provide a supporting document that shows restricting or withholding information is in the public's best interest, not just your charity's interests. Our example charity doesn't need to restrict or withhold any information from the public register, so we'll not tick this box and go straight to the next page, review and submit. If you do tick this box, however, you can see that you'll need to provide a supporting document. On this page, you can see all the information you've entered into the annual return form and review it to check that it's correct. Click the arrows for each section to expand it and see the information. If any information is incorrect, click the Edit button on that relevant section to take you to the page of the annual return. Once your annual return is complete and correct, click on the yellow Submit Annual Return button to submit the form to us. Please remember that once you submit the annual return, you will not be able to make any changes. This includes uploading any new documents like your performance report. After you submit your annual return, you'll see a confirmation notice, as you can see on the screen, and you'll be advised if anything further is required. Charities with a total gross income over $10,000 must pay a filing fee, and your annual return is only complete when we have received and processed your filing fee. Full details of the amount and the account name and number will be provided in an email from Charity Services to the primary contact. You can pay this by direct deposit or bank transfer. Information on how to pay and full details of the filing fees is available on our website, which is also linked on this page. And when you return to your dashboard, you can see that the status of the annual return is now awaiting payment, if a payment is required. You can also see the performance report has been uploaded and can view the summary of the annual return.
But you cannot make changes after this point.
That's correct. Now we have some time for your questions. Please type your questions into the Q&A box if you haven't done so already. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. We just ask that you don't send questions specific to your charity. If you have specific questions, please send us an email or give us a call. Our contact information is on the slide.
Can we just attach the financial accounts instead of filling out online financial form details?
So your annual return requires both. You must provide the full performance report, which is your financial accounts and your non-financial information for the financial year, and you also must provide an annual return. The information you're entering into the annual return is what's actually on the register when people search for data, but both need to be provided.
That's right. The performance report is, or financial statements are for people who are specifically interested in your entity. I mean, yes, they are a requirement under the Act, but they're also more specific information related to your specific entity. Whereas the data that you're entering into the annual return is across all tiers and all charities, and goes into the larger data within the charity's register. So that those people can search across the entire sector. They can look for specific information dependent on what your charity does, like the sector that it's in, or uh, potential areas. Yeah. Our operating expenditure is not over the threshold, but we have a deed requirement to get our accounts audited. How do we report this so we can provide information about our auditors?
So the question where you state whether or not you have a statutory requirement to be audited is specifically about those thresholds. If you're below the threshold but you are being audited, you can still absolutely provide that information with your performance report. And you should. Keep in mind, if you're below the threshold and your rules say you need to be audited, your rules will also say how often and who needs to complete that audit. So it could be that it's an audit, just an independent review, someone having a look at it, but it could also state that it has to be a qualified auditor. That's going to depend on your rules, but the specific question in the annual return is specifically about those thresholds.
But also something to consider is if you still require that audit. So I understand it's in your deed, but it is something to review every 3 years to ensure that that still works for you. It's still something that is required. If it's required for funding and you're finding it's getting more expensive through the years, you might request that whichever funder is requesting this audit, that potentially they help you pay for it. But yeah, it's good to explain it if you'd like to, but always consider if you actually do need to be reviewed or audited.
Yeah, always make sure that your rules are fit for purpose.
Why do you need to enter the details in the annual return if you have supplied the financial reports? In other words, double doing the same job. Look, I get it. It's like when you apply for a job and you have your CV filled out and you need to fill out everything again, and you think, why can't you just read the information? Well, we can't. We don't have the software for that. Um, and so, like we mentioned before, the performance report and the financial statements are for people interested in your charity. The data that you're entering into the annual return is so that we can capture information across all charities. And there are 29,000 of you. So that's a lot of information, but we like to gather it so we can provide good information so that we can ensure that we have enough people to support you, that kind of thing. It's really helpful for not only us, but for the public at large,
For the sector.
for the sector, for governments, and for researchers.
The question under the charity rules about whether your charity governance is reviewed in the last 3 years is it the Board of Trustees of the charity responsible for undertaking this review? So it is the governing body of your charity. If you're a trust, then it would be your Board of Trustees. But if you're a society, that would be your officers. It really depends on your charity's unique structure as to who's going to complete that review. And like we said, what it looks like is ultimately up to each charity. Can we submit a draft into the future and in the future review the submit a review or audit?
I think that's what that means. I really don't completely understand the question, but no, we prefer if you do not submit a draft.
If you have a statutory requirement to be reviewed or audited, you cannot submit a draft.
Under paid staff hours, what contractors need to be included. That is, plumbers, architects, designers. Are these contractors for the purposes of this section?
So it ultimately depends on what kind of work they're doing and how they've been hired. One of the easiest ways to delineate them is whether or not you're paying tax for them.
Like payroll tax.
Payroll tax, that's right. But if you're hiring someone to provide a service and you're simply paying for that service and all of that administration is left up to the contractor, then you would usually record that as cost of a service rather than an employee.
That's right. It would be related to the expenditure that that they are working on. For example, if it's a plumber, then that's repairs and maintenance. That's likely how you would code that into your software if you're using software, and then that would just be your general expenditure for your charity.
Yeah.
Can a copy of the return be downloaded to my computer before submission?
Before submission, no, because the annual return you're providing to us is information you already have. But once it's submitted, like we mentioned on your dashboard, you can open that PDF version and download it. Absolutely.
You can do a screenshot. It depends how technology advanced you are. But each page, if you're using Microsoft, you can do a full screen capture to make sure if you want to use it to review or to show another person who might be the reviewer. And the system will save where you are. It saves each page as you complete it.
Absolutely. Every time you click the next button, your progress up to that point is saved. When you start again, it'll start from the front page, but what you've filled in remains.
Yeah, but you'll need to print out each page. It won't print it all out for you.
Yeah.
As a draft.
Would it be appropriate to submit the report under Tier 3, even though the annual income is just below $140,000?
Yeah, for sure. It depends on the basis of accounting. It's 100%, well, not 100%, but it's the most important thing. So if you are using accrual accounting, that is, you are not on the cash basis of accounting, then you are required to use Tier 3. You cannot use Tier 4. Tier 4 is only for cash basis of accounting. So you can always opt up to a higher tier, but there are particular requirements to be in the lower tiers. For Tier 3, your expenditure needs to be below 5 million for the prior 2 years and the current year. But again, yes, if you are using accrual accounting and potentially using software, it doesn't matter the expenditure. You can still use Tier 3.
Yeah. And remember, when you're doing the annual return, you will have already completed your performance report, so you'll already know what tier you're reporting on and how your performance report was prepared.
That's right.
Do the categories classifications in our financial reports now need to match exactly the ones on the template?
Yes. So in the newest tier 3 NFP standard, which is mandatory for all financial years ending 31 March 2025 or after, there are minimum categories that are required. These are set out in the standard, but of course they're also listed on the performance report, so you can see what they are. As you can see, it splits out donations and grants where they had all been included before. We have a couple of webinars on that, not only how to complete the performance report,
but also what's changed.
Yeah, there's also one that's just for what's changed. Now, if you are using software and you have all the minimum categories in there, but you don't have any particular expenditure in one of them, it is okay not to show that category if it's 0. So you might only have 2 of the 5 categories of income, and that's fine. So if your financial statements print out with just 2 of them, that's fine.
But you still need to put zeros in the annual return where relevant.
That's right. Can you start a return, have it saved, and come back to finish it later?
Absolutely. When you click Create Annual Return and you determine what year it is, From the first page onwards, you have created that annual return and it's saved in the system until you complete it and submit it, or until you delete it. As we mentioned, every page that you complete is saved up to that point. There's a button at the top always on the left-hand side that says Charity Dashboard, so you can always easily return to your dashboard. And when you do, you'll notice that instead of Create Annual Return, that is a green Continue Annual Return button.
That's right.
And the Update Details button is crossed out because you can only have one form at a time. So you can always create your annual return, do part of it, and come back to it later. But keep in mind that you won't be able to do other forms while you're completing the annual return.
When can you remove an officer from the register? Can it be done at other times?
Absolutely. The first few pages of the annual return are very, very similar to the update details form that you can prepare at any time. The rule is you must provide us with an update within either 3 months of the change happening or within 3 months of you becoming aware of the change. So the update details form is always available unless you're in the process of completing an annual return form. So if you've got officers who are changing, if you've got new officers that need to be added, as soon as that process is done with your organization, log into your dashboard, and either if you're doing an annual return form, do it there, or complete an update details form as soon as possible. How do you know which reporting version you should do for right at the beginning?
That is, oh, right at the beginning. So that's
So below the year.
right.
New
So
version,
that's the current versus new. I know the terminology is confusing. It will be much more simple in about a couple of weeks. So current means the the former accounting standard, or the one that is current only through the end of this month. So that is the previous Tier 3 PBE. It's got a really horrible name.
Public benefit entity.
Yes,
Not-for-profit.
not-for-profit Tier 3
Yeah,
standard.
it's a very, very long name.
Very long name. That is available for charities to use only through year ends of 28 February 2025, which of course is reporting is or due to report by the end of this month, 31 August.
Or earlier.
Or earlier. Although there is early adoption for Tier 3 NFP standard. So that's what that relates to, because those fields on that annual return will match that particular performance report and that standard. If you have moved to the updated standard, the Tier 3 NFP, either early adoption or because your year has ended at 31 March 2025 or later, you'll want to choose the new annual return. Now, after a couple of weeks from now, that will no longer be an option. It will just be the updated one because those fields match. And from that time going forward, everyone should be on the Tier 3 NFP standard.
That's right. Is a volunteer who's paid an honorarium regarded as a part-time employee?
No, they are a volunteer. An honorarium is the expenditure that you can put in the volunteer expenses.
We've used previously on the income list, providing services that are core businesses. This is no longer on the income list. What do we use in the new income list? I believe this is about.
Well, this is specific to the performance report. So have a look at our
introduction to the Tier 3 not-for-profit.
That's right, our webinar. It will go over that kind of thing. We also have a guidebook on the Tier 3 page of our website that goes into much greater detail of what each income category means and provides examples for each category.
That's right. If an accountant prepares our financial statements, is this considered a review or does it have to be a qualified registered auditor?
That is not considered a review, as they are just a preparer. I think you'll notice that when they do that, they put a little disclaimer at the beginning of your report saying that no review is undertaken, that they've just compiled the statements. What that means is you've given them the information and they've prepared it for you. And they're basically distancing themselves to say that we have not undergone any kind of assurance in these figures. We have just put them together. If you are statutorily required to get an audit or review, that needs to be done by a qualified auditor. You can find a qualified auditor on the Chartered Accountants Australia New Zealand website, otherwise known as CANZ. And if you just type in CANZ, CAANZ, into Google, you'll find their website. And at the very top of their website, they'll have a button that says Find a CA. Click on that, and you can look by name, by firm, and by area to find a qualified accountant.
And auditing or review of financial statements is a separate service from preparing the accounts
That's
to
right.
begin with.
Mhm.
Preparing the accounts always comes first, and then once they're prepared, you would take them to an auditor or reviewer for an auditor review.
Yep.
If a charity is an incorporated society and is re-registered under the 2022 Act, including changing the rules to be complying with the Act, does that count as a review of governance? Yes, absolutely it does. If you're in the process of updating your rules document, the first stage of that process is checking what your rules currently say, determining if they're fit for purpose, and then making that change. That is exactly what most review processes would be. So yes, if you've recently changed your rules, by definition, you have also reviewed your rules. So click yes to that question and include the date that that change happened.
What if you expanded your categories of income and expenses? How do I complete the online form? So the online form isn't meant to completely regurgitate or be exactly the same as every single field of your performance report. Your performance report will show a lot more detail than the annual return. We have only chosen the fields that we're interested in across all charities across this tier. So you won't need to expand the categories, just provide the categories that are listed in those statements.
With the changes on the account classification for statement of financial performance and financial position, do we need to reclassify the prior year to align with these changes in the reporting for comparability?
You do. Yes, you do. That is a requirement of the new standard.
And keep in mind, the annual return does not show previous year's figures. That's in the performance report.
That's right.
Okay, thanks everyone for all of your questions. Remember, you can rewatch this webinar again at any time, as the recording will be available on our website. We hope that attending today's session was useful to you, and you now understand more about completing your annual return online. Thanks for attending.